showtime.
Hello everybody and welcome to the third week in Beetle-gust. In the first week I created the kitchen walls, and in the second week we had a live stream where I created this bench. It's from the front hall of the house. And at the end of this video I will do a quick run through for those of you who didn't watch the live stream, or those of you who did watch the live stream and want to see how I finished it up. But for today I could not ignore this base any longer. It's basically 4 pre-built rooms ready to go. If you're new to the series, this is a base that I had custom built to go on top of a folding table. It has, well, I'll show you. I'll kind of take it apart so you can kind of see it a little bit better. But this is going to be the area in which all of the Netherworld is contained within. So it's going to be directly underneath the house. I'm going to try my very best to lift this up. Let's see. It's kind of heavy. I don't know if you can tell. There's a hole right here, and this is where the wires are going to go down through the base, or actually come up through the base and go through to the house. There's 4 rooms. So on this side you can see there's this extra small space. What this is an area so that I could reach my hand inside and mess with the wires that are inside the table, and I can also put some kind of control panel in there so the light switches are easy to access. So now I'm going to do my best to lift this and take it over there to my table. So here we go. Here we go. Okay, kind of hit the camera. It's okay. Kind of hit the lights. It's okay. Putting it on the table. It's okay. We did it. Are you okay? Stormy, are you okay? Okay. So now that that's done, you can see the table a little bit better. It also has a hole cut into the center that matches up with the hole in the base so that the wire or the plug, whatever, can go down through the bottom and I don't have to worry about it coming out the side of my project. What do you think? It's a U-size table. So now I'm going to get painting a base coat on the base. Let's go. It's a little large, but this is going to be a lot easier for me to paint up here rather than close to the ground. I have these paints that I got reduced from Home Depot, but it'll be a good way to prime the base and kind of seal the wood before I start working on anything. So here we go. I had my filter on when I started painting, but it wasn't enough. This paint smelled horrible. So I made sure, and I got my mask, and I also went and got a different paint, random color from the garage. And I'm thinking, hoping this will be a little bit better. I don't know what's going on with this paint, but whoo! The color I ended up getting from the garage was just plain white, which is fine because everything's going to end up being covered up once the rooms are built into the base, so what I painted it really didn't matter. I didn't end up sanding much, but I did go ahead and fill any obvious holes with some wood filler. This way, when I do a final finish on the edges, it's ready to go. I also momentarily thought about putting stripes all the way around the edges, just, you know, to give it a little bit more of a Tim Burton look, but in the end I realized that was probably going to be a waste of time and I stopped. The base is painted, it's dry, and I'm ready to move on to actually working within the room. I'm going to be trying to recreate the hallway scene you see in the Underworld. I think it's a really interesting part of the movie, and it'll be really challenging, I guess, yeah, challenging to recreate in miniature, and I'm always up for a challenge. One of the reasons this one is going to be so challenging is because of the perspective. I'm going to have to force some perspective here because I have a rather short space to work with. I'm going to make a smaller door that's about halfway up the back wall, and then I'm going to create a hallway that gets larger and larger as it gets closer to the front of the space.
I'm working with cardboard this time instead of foam board because I know I'm going to be cutting a lot of different pieces and possibly warping the cardboard a little bit. And I already have the really strong walls made out of wood, so I felt like cardboard would be okay. I'm using some hot glue and cutting off a piece of that first hallway base that you saw, and I'm just going to add in some temporary platforms to start figuring out how I want this to look. As a reminder, I'm just kind of getting the feel of these spaces, so it won't be 100% screen accurate to the movie. As long as I capture the essence of each room, I'm going to be happy with it. I'm slowly measuring, cutting, and gluing each piece until I have a 3-segmented hallway floor. I also decided the front part of the hallway, I wanted it to angle out a little bit more, and I think this will help with the exaggerated perspective. I decided I wanted this corner to go down a little bit more, and this is why it can be really good to work with cardboard when you're wanting to just kind of push things around. Foam board tends to snap if you try to do this, and so this was really helpful to work with. Once I was happy with the hallway floor, I could move on to the walls. I wanted to go ahead and get every single thing cut out to begin with before I did anything else to make sure I was happy with the overall space. I also found a really convenient work area on top of the house base, as it was really the only surface left in my workroom. The left side wall ended up being 3 segments just like the floor was, and this kind of matches along with the floor. It bends with the floor, or each segment is cut off where the segment in the floor is, if that makes sense. I also added a door in each segment, just like it is in the movie, and then of course the one at the end of the hallway. Now to add the right side wall, this one I wanted to angle out a little bit more to keep with that little bit of disorientation you feel when looking down that hallway in the film. Here I'm just estimating an angle so I can go cut it off and make sure that it works and will help support this angled wall. If you want to try something like this for yourself, just make sure to take your time, use a pencil, and mark out where you think you need to make your cuts. Make your cuts one at a time and then test it each time to make sure you are happy with what you have. Alright, so here is how the hallway is looking. Sorry, my chair is squeaking. And I'll have 4 doors on this side. I'm going to leave this one a solid wall. And then I had a fun idea for over here. In the reference I showed you, there is a gel cell type door, and I thought it would be really fun to put that one here so you can still kind of see through the wall, but then put some kind of creature in this room, possibly a sandworm, so it's like you're seeing into the other side of one of these doors. And that way I'm not wasting any space. I still have the really interesting shape of the hallway, and then it's kind of a peek inside. I'm really excited about that. I'm gonna go ahead and cut out these doors and figure out what my next step is. I got all the doorways cut out so I can kind of see what things are going to look like, and then I made sure to number and keep all of these. These are going to be my door patterns for when I actually make the doors. This way I know that they will fit exactly. These are just the shapes that I cut out, and so that should work, hopefully. Because I like everything that I've done here, I'm going to go ahead and move all of these walls out. I'm going to put a bunch of cardboard and hot glue underneath this platform to support it, because right now it's still very bendable, and then I'll figure out the next step after that. If you're wondering why I'm leaving some space between the cardboard wall and the wood wall, that's because I plan to put a lot of lights into this area. It's supposed to have like a blue hue to the entire space, so that's what that area is mainly supposed to be. After gluing in many supports, I felt like the ramp was strong enough that I didn't have to worry about it collapsing. Then it was time to do everything I could to smooth out the floor. So as you can see, there's an edge of cardboard there, so I decided to take a strip of cardboard, crush one side so it was kind of a triangular prism, and then glue that so it's kind of a mini ramp going from that one platform down to the one that's leading to the edge. Now I'm going to cover everything with some poster board. This is going to help alleviate any of those cardboard wrinkles that come whenever you paint cardboard. I pre-bent the edge that's going onto the upper part of the hallway, and then I'm going to go ahead and glue everything down. I'm using some Elmer's all-purpose because it's really easy to spread and make it flat. It's a little bit easier, at least in my opinion, to spread than tacky glue. Once that's down, I'm going to do everything I can to flatten that out and make sure that it's adhering to the cardboard. Then I can work on the upper part of the hallway. I'm going to make sure and pre-bend it to the crease of the other segment. Remember, there's 3 segments. And then I am going to make sure that the edge is at the very top of that ramp area. Once everything's glued down, I definitely want to do a layer of Mod Podge. This is just going to make a nice smooth surface. If there's any problems or bubbles that come up, they will come up during this phase before I start painting. I also wanted to sand it down just a little bit to try and make sure and get out as many paint lines as I could. Even though the poster board itself was already white, I decided to go ahead and use a coat of white acrylic paint for my first layer. I'm painting this on with the paintbrush, but later on I will be doing the black part of the paint with the airbrush. I'm trying to get it as smooth as possible, and then again after this dries I do go back and sand it to try and get out as many brush strokes as possible. I did quite a bit of research when it came to how to airbrush a checker pattern, and it seemed like it was going to involve a lot of tape no matter what I did. You can also use contact paper, which might have been a better idea. It would have been a little easier to cut through as well, but I like to use what I had on hand, and I had this frog tape, so that's what I ended up using. After first sticking it to my clothing to help take away some of the tackiness, I laid down each strip until I have an even coat of frog tape. Now I'm going to be counting out 6, I was about to say even, but when it comes to Tim Burton you don't have to do even spaces. 6 dots that are going to create 7 different rows of tiles. I'm going to make sure that at each segment side I have 6 dots that I can connect the lines to. This will ensure that my 7 rows of tiles go all the way from the front to the small door in the back, and this will help the perspective look. The horizontal lines can just kind of go wherever they look good, but of course they get closer together the closer you get to that smaller door. I'm going to be using a Sharpie to X out every single tile that I need to cut out. These are areas that are going to get the black paint from the airbrush, so that's why they need to be cut out. I'm doing this beforehand because I don't want to have to be trying to figure it out as I'm working on each piece. This part ended up being the most painstaking part of the process. It took absolutely forever, and especially when I had to cut through 2 layers of tape. So I figured we could take a brief intermission while I cut out a million different squares. Bentley House Minis now presents Delia's Bench. I will be doing an overview of what happened in the live stream and how I finished this bench off stream. For this project, I used some thick balsa wood and some sticks I found at the craft store. These are hollow on the interior, and that ends up being important later down the road. I'm using the stairs that I built in a previous video to figure out how wide I want the bench to be. I'm marking this off on my balsa wood and using my X-Acto blade to cut through. For the legs, I'm just going to be using the same thickness of balsa, but I'm going to be cutting it shorter and hopefully even. I ended up using the wrong square for this one, but nobody knows that unless you go back and watch the stream. It's a little uneven, but it's all right in the end. And then I'm just gluing those to either side of the balsa wood bench. To support this, I'm putting 2 triangles of balsa wood in the very back. Once I'm happy with the size, I can go ahead and start working on the back. This is a really unique piece, and so I was glad to find these sticks that had an interesting look. I'm adding some masking tape with the sticky side up. This will make it a little bit easier to construct the frame out of these wobbly sticks. I'm using a pair of flat cutters to cut off each piece, and then I'm using some hot glue to tack them in place while I'm figuring out my design. You can see my inspiration there on the left. I'm using some wood filler to fill in any gaps, and then cutting off short pieces that are going to fill in the back of the chair. Even though I'm tacking everything in place right now with hot glue, later on after the stream I went back with some tacky glue and made sure to cover all of those joints with tacky glue. I never want to rely just on hot glue to hold my miniatures together over the years. I'm pretty happy with how it looks, so I'm going to go ahead with the paint job. I'm using some black on the base of the bench. I wasn't quite sure if it was dark blue or black, but I thought I'd just go ahead and go with black. This is going to take several coats of black paint and then sanding, and then I'm going to be using some glossy Mod Podge over the top. I had read in one of my comments to try and use a credit card or something to smooth out the Mod Podge to avoid the brush strokes. So I wanted to try that out. I didn't have a credit card, which may have worked a little bit better, but I did have a piece of thick paper and it seemed to work okay at first. I don't know if it has to do with the amount of Mod Podge you put on there, or maybe I just need to practice a little bit more. That was all we had time for in the live stream, so everything you see after this I did afterwards. You can see the shine on the bench. This was 3 coats going back and forth between acrylic paint and glossy Mod Podge, and I'm pretty happy with how it came out. The sticks on the back of the bench in the reference are a lot lighter than the ones I've used here, so I'm using some beige paint to just lightly paint them, and I'm leaving a little bit of that brown showing through so they have an aged look. Now it's time to connect these two together. I had an idea of using wires sticking out of the top of the bench and into the holes, so what I'm doing now is using a white pen to mark where some of the larger holes are so I can drill into the bench and insert wires. I'm not doing this for every single stick that's on the back of the bench because some of them are rather narrow. I'm just doing it for a few of them. For the wire, I'm just using some old Christmas hooks. I'm cutting off the straight parts and then inserting them in the holes that I drilled, making sure to add a little bit of glue as I do that. I'm also going to add glue all along the very back edge, wherever that bottom part of the frame is going to hit, and then on top of each of these wires that's going to go inside of the poles that go on the back. Then I can carefully insert the wires into the poles, crossing my fingers that they actually line up, and they did. I'm going to do this very carefully and make sure that everything dries completely, and that is the finished bench. Okay, intermission over, back to this project, and finally the last squares are being cut out and we are ready to airbrush this checkered floor. I'm first going to use a trick called the Mod Podge trick. I don't know any other name for it. It's where you go over the edge of the tape with a little bit of Mod Podge, and this seals the tape so that you have a clean line. Now it's time to airbrush. Since the last video, I learned how to adjust my air pressure, and that has made all the difference. As you can see, I can make some really fine lines now, so I will be continuing to learn and grow with this airbrush. I'm still really having a lot of fun with it. I'm doing my first coat of black, going over each white square, trying to get it as even as possible, but I do go over it 2 or 3 times to make sure everything is even. This part was a lot more fun than the taping part. I also decided to go over the edges a little bit. I really don't know what I'm going to do with the edges down the line. I just keep messing with them. I don't know. I also thought I was going to paint the entire back wall, but I realized I was using a lot of paint doing that, so I just do that with an acrylic paint with brush later on. To my joyous surprise, I realized I was going to have to go over the edges with a blade yet again. This was to break the hold that the Mod Podge had, and if I didn't do that, it started to pull on the paint. I tried my best with this, although there were some points where it got messed up, and you will be able to see in this close-up. There were some points where it just pulled. I didn't cut enough with my blade to really make it work, and so I knew there was going to be some cleanup that I needed to do. I spent quite a bit of time last night with my head kind of inside this area of the project, trying to go back and forth and fix the floor. I improved some spots, I made some spots a little bit worse, and in the end I just had to at one point call it good enough. Then I decided to put a layer of Mod Podge over the entire floor, and there was a spot of black paint that wasn't dry yet, and so I smudged it all over everything that I just had finished fixing. So then I fixed it again with the white paint, and then I went to bed. So this morning, with fresh energy and a fresh excitement for this floor, I got up and I airbrushed some gloss paint that came in the Jazza Army Painters set. So now that that is finished and I'm happy with it enough to move on, I'm ready to work on the walls. I'm going to work on this side wall first with the 3 doors. I think the best way to start is to go ahead and glue these walls in place. They are going to help again with the structure with the floor. And then I'm going to be making a template so I can cut it out of poster board and then attach it to the wall. So let's get started on that. Here's a close-up of how the floor looks with the gloss varnish on it, and I think it looks, I mean, it's not super shiny, but it has just the right amount of shine, so I'm very happy with how it looks. Before messing with the walls, I did realize I needed to drill into that center part of the base so that I could eventually run wires behind this wall. I know it's kind of confusing because I painted everything black, but that is the center part of the wall. I'm not drilling into the other room. I also made sure to drill through where that door is going to be because it's supposed to have a lit up exit sign. Now that those are done, I can go ahead and put up the walls where the doors are going to be. I'm using some junk mail to make a template, and this is just scraps of paper. I cut different sizes in 90-degree angles. This really works well with a normal house. Doesn't work super well with, Tim Burton doors. So I had to custom cut some of my pieces to fit, but once it was done and all taped together, I could remove my template and put it straight onto a piece of poster board, cut it out, and I know I have a perfect piece that's going to fit on my cardboard. In hindsight, I could have just covered each individual piece of cardboard. I didn't have to make it one smooth wall because I am going to put columns in between each door at the very end. So this was kind of an unnecessary thing, but in the end, it's fine. It worked. I clamped down all the edges while it dried and did my best to smooth out any bumps. I covered the floor. I didn't want to do anything else to mess up the floor. And I'm using the airbrush again to give a flat coat of gray paint to the entire wall. I don't show this in the video, but I go ahead and do that to the ceiling as well, as I think anything that's not the floor or the doors is gray. I'm carefully removing this cover for the floor, and I had one little mistake where it pulled up the paint, but it was easy enough to fix with just a little bit of black. For this wall, I went ahead and made it outside of the room because I felt like it was going to be an awkward angle to try and get it painted. So I just made the structure and covered it with poster board and then slowly and carefully slid it into place and then glued it into place. So here is my hallway with its walls. I'm really happy with it. I love that you kind of have to look around the corner to see inside. I'm using some of this pink foam insulation that I've seen a lot of model makers use. I've never used it before, but I thought the columns in the example look a lot like this. Much like the cardboard walls, this is a painstaking process of slowly trying to fit things in place and then marking where I need to cut things off and slowly adjusting bit by bit until things fit and work out. I could have made more extreme angles with these, but I didn't want to cut off the view too much from the front of the room all the way to the back, so I tried to minimize the size of these pieces while still giving them the feel of the ones in the movie. This foam was very easy to carve, but it did make quite a mess, and it stuck to almost everything. So, of course, during the painting and also during this foam part, Stormy was not in the room. This second set of column and beams only had one column, so I had to get a little creative with that, but in the end, I think I figured it out. So now it's time to airbrush these. But first, googly eyes. We definitely have to put googly eyes on the airbruppy. There we go. We got it. It's at this point I realized I made a little bit of a mistake with the foam. I probably should have coated it with Mod Podge or wood glue or something to make them a little bit more resistant to scratches and dents because they are extremely soft. I went ahead and painted them. They took the paint really well, but once I had already installed them into the house, I realized it was super easy to put a fingernail dent into all of them. So most likely in the next video you will see me addressing this because I do want to make sure I am creating things that will last a long time, and just one bump to that front column could really, put a dent in things, as they say. But so far I am happy, extremely happy with how this is coming along. I really do think it looks like the hallway I was going for. So that's going to be it for this week's video. Camera comes on, dog shows up, right? I'm not going to even clean anything up because I'm just going to continue working on this space for next week. My goal for that will be to make the doors and hopefully the sandworm and possibly decorate the sandworm's cell. Before I conclude the video, I did get some packages in the mail for the house project. If you want to know more about the house project, I will leave a link in the description to my latest video where I talked about that, and I will leave a timestamp so you don't have to rewatch the whole video if you want more information. These houses coming in are so amazing. I am so over the moon with all of these. I do have to apologize because I'm going to have to learn how to film these teeny tiny houses. I realized a few of them, especially the ones that have like a word or super tiny doors or windows, were a little bit hard to film, so I added like a little picture just to make sure that you could actually see the details that each individual artist put into these pieces. I know there are probably going to be some duplicates of the really iconic pieces that are on the diorama, but don't worry about that. Make the piece that you want to make. Each artist's interpretation is going to be different. I did want to point out this one from Thomas. He sent in some Monopoly pieces that he had used a saw and a blade to cut and put back together. I think this is a great way to do this if you're worried about having a house shape or building the house shape and you just want to paint a house. I definitely suggest going this route. He got a huge bag of houses on eBay for $1. I just wanted to chime in here real quick. Yes, you are in the hallway. I had several people mention that they were worried about the dimensions of the miniature house because I just said that they need to be the size of the fingernail. If you're worried about not making it the right scale, a Monopoly house is a good measure, but in the end, don't worry about it too much because all of them will be used throughout the house. So even if I get one that's a little bit too big to go on the table, it will end up somewhere and each one will have its own moment. So I hope in saying this, I relieve a little bit of that worry you might feel over not getting it quite right, because I really hope this is just a fun project that gets people into making some of their own miniatures. Thank you so much to everyone who sent in a package. I also had someone who has another channel make a video over their build. I will leave a link to Dolphin Magic Pro's channel in the description box below if you want to go check out how he made his build, if you need some inspiration or ideas. I think I'll end this video with a quote from my daughter, which I think sums up this project perfectly. She said, "I like it, but it makes my head hurt." Fair enough. I think that means I've captured it. I hope you all have an amazing week, and I will see you in the next one. Bye. You gotta stop jingling. No more jingling. In the first week, I created the kitchen walls. In the second week, go lay in your bed. Oh my goodness. Before I conclude the video though, I did It's black and white like you. She's not impressed.